co-host for this session for Sean Kelly. Sean, what's up, dude? How are you, man?
Hey, what's up, man? Thanks for having me co-host with you, Herb. I'm really excited to be here, my friend.
Yeah, thanks, dude. We're excited to have you. And our guest for today joins us from Australia, Mr. Cameron Cresswell. Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, spot on. Yeah, just don't call me late for dinner, as they say.
Right on, man. Hey, dude, thank you so much for taking the time to join us and share some of your insights. I'm excited to have this conversation. Yeah, I'm excited to have this conversation to obviously learn a little bit about your guys' market, compare some similarities between the two, and most importantly, see what we can get out of it so we can, share with our listeners. The first question I ask everybody that comes on the show is to share your experience, right? Your automotive experience with us in the audience.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Herb. Yeah, so my the category I put myself in is basically the way I describe myself as being basically damaged goods from birth. That's the category I put myself in, and fair to say, most people in the automotive industry probably put themselves into some sort of damaged category, but. The reason I say that is that I'm 43 years old. When I was born, our family, we were the Ford dealers for the area in which we live. So we had a Ford dealership, and when my father was born, his father was a Ford dealer as well. So I'm third generation automotive person. My grandfather, actually, that behind me, you probably poor example for an audio medium, but behind me you can see a couple of the advertisements actually for my grandfather's business way back in the 50s. So my grandfather started with Ford when Ford made more tractors back in 1932 here in Australia. So that's how far back the sort of lineage goes. And
Wow.
and yeah, so you can say from the kitchen table to now, I've always been in and around and connected to the industry. Spent time in both the dealership space and also the aftermarket space, and yeah, obviously, and now doing what we do in servicing the industry in the Australian and New Zealand markets in the recruitment space.
Cool, man. So it's very interesting, right? You're right now doing. You're acquiring talent for dealerships, right? And that's and that's your own company. Started that yourself.
Yeah. Basically, Automotive Talent is a business that I started and founded around 7 years ago. I started the business because I felt that there was a need to service the industry in a slightly different way. There was in my experience, the industry in the way it selected people and acquired people, and sometimes got it spectacularly correct, and sometimes it missed the target slightly, which does happen. And also the recruitment industry, I felt in our part of the world wasn't necessarily servicing the industry in a way that I felt it should be done. So I started Automotive Talent, and basically the rest is history. We service 1,100 companies across the Australian and the New Zealand market. Our specialty is automotive, and we cover everything from the OEM space through to the dealership space and everything underneath the roof line of the dealership, and also all the way through to the mum and dad two hoist behind a service station in need of a mechanic and everything in between. So our specialty is obviously the automotive industry, but in a nutshell, what we endeavour to do is put the people back in the people business.
Right on, man. And I'm just curious. Here, it's very high turn. It's a very high turnover business, especially when we're talking about dealership. And in particular, the sales side. And I'm just curious, is that similarity the same in your market, or do you guys see something a little bit different kind of tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it is basic. It is exactly the same, Herb. Out of all the internal departments of the industry, sales has always been and still is today probably the area of highest turnover, and I think there are many reasons for that. It is obviously it's a very pressurized part of the business. And look, every department is pressurized, but sales obviously is a fairly high pressurized part of the business. And my feeling is on the sales side, and interesting in listening to the previous podcast that you've put together and the people that you've been in discussions with. My experience has been exactly the same. I think the sales side of the business, where you do find that there is lower turnover, and where you do find that people have a longer tenure with organisations, is when those organisations have invested in those people, and generally the greatest investment is when they've taken someone from a customer service type of industry or a sales based type industry where they've had previous experience in interacting with people and delivering service to people, where they've been able to bolt on the automotive experience side of that and trained them in their methods. That's when you've seen the longer tenure with these businesses. We in Australia in the market, like we're there, you could probably put organisations into two buckets. That's, in the first bucket, it's the more traditional. I'm seeking a salesperson or a candidate with experience, and that's where I feel that you get that higher turnover. In the other bucket, you go down that pathway of growing and nurturing and grooming your own, and that's where you seem to get the greater return and the longer term return on that investment.
It's very interesting, and this question is kind of a dual question, because I think Sean would have a good input in this. But it's very interesting to me that you're experiencing the same. We're thousands of miles apart. The only thing that really connects us is the industry. Yet we're seeing that exact same issue, right? Regardless of culture and all these things. And so it just I can't help but think about. What is it about the industry, man, that is it's just, is it just too cutthroat? Is it just that it requires a certain individual, a certain mindset in order to kind of do it successfully? Like, I don't know. I mean, what do you think about that, Sean?
Herb, I wanted to throw one out there. I think I think it's misaligned expectations, right? Because if you asked 100 people coming into the car business, what does it really take to succeed at the dealership? And I don't care what role you're in. I think what you'll find is that their expectations are not aligned with what it really takes. Because I coach a lot of, I coach all sorts of different tenure, and a lot of the people that have been doing it for 30 days or 60 days, they're like, man, it's not as busy as I thought it would be, or this is a lot harder than I expected. And I think a lot of people just think that they're going to sit there, customers walk in and say, I want that one, and then they just sign a buyer's order, And I wanted to ask Cameron, it's interesting on the service side. I hear a lot of dealers and service managers talk about how hard it is to find techs. I mean, that's huge now too. Is that a challenge over there? And if so, and heck, even if not, what are some of your best practices, Cameron, for finding really good technicians?
Yeah, and look, absolutely. The technicians are definitely a challenge to find here, as they are in most markets that we work in. And the best practice is the old school original practice, that is grow your own. Get that apprentice in, nurture them and develop them and ingrain them in your culture and your practices, and train them in your brand. And that's where, once again, that's where you get that longer term tenure of engagement. Now that's the ideal scenario, and it would be great to have some sort of magic formula that you could You know, plant the seed, keep watering it till the point where you start yielding a return from that apprentice, which turns into a technician. But a lot of the time, the business is so fluid. You know, brands ramp up in demand and car park size, and you can't wait that 4-year period to grow that apprentice. You need people now, and getting technicians in the Australian market absolutely is incredibly difficult. You know, businesses are balancing that war between, you know, managing their payroll and getting a return and making sure their businesses are profitable. Technicians, like in some brands, they're in very high demand and monetarily wise can demand a lot. Our local government in both the Australian and New Zealand market have made it pretty hard to source qualified technicians from overseas. They've kind of put a lot of barriers and paperwork in place to really limit the business's ability to do that here, which that was a pathway that the industry was going down 10 years ago. It was, you know, don't worry about growing your own, just go to South Africa or, you know, Ireland or whatever and import your own, and they're great. So it is a massive challenge, and I think one of the greatest challenges actually of the industry is attracting that next generation to it. That's what I see is one of the biggest challenges of all. And the thing about our industry is it's a bloody fantastic industry. It's been great to many people, us included, and we have to spread that message. We really do. And you know, we have to get out there and really spruik the greatness that is the automotive industry, because it's an industry that's going to be around for some time. So it can be a great career move for many good people.
Yeah, you know, I wonder, you know, and kind of tell us a little bit about the landscape there, but I wonder if it's at an educational level that we've kind of fallen off when it comes to the technician role or position, right? I mean, is that not a focus in the education system anymore as it once was? Is it, you know, like, why is that job lost its charm? And let me develop that a little bit more. So in the past, vehicles were not as technologically advanced as they are right now. Like for a technician today, you know, in the landscape of today, they have to be extremely well prepared, right? And so I feel like a lot of, you know, as that position has gotten more complex and has gotten, I want to say, better, right? You know, it's like we've lost interest or enthusiasm for it. I don't know. It's just kind of weird. Like I don't quite understand it.
I think in some ways it's a society linked thing. Like it, you know, you look at the pathway for a pathway for an apprentice in our part of the world. You know, you're not picking up that school leaver that you went, you know, to, you know, halfway through their secondary schooling and said, you know what, high school isn't for me. Most people see the secondary school system all the way through to graduating at the senior level now. So, you know, by the time most businesses are grabbing these apprentices, they're at least 17, possibly 18 years old, which is in many ways maybe too late. Maybe it is too late in many ways. Like we've got to really go down that grabbing these kids earlier, I believe, before they get financially too committed to you know, those massive paychecks where the business can afford to support them and they can live off on apprenticeship level wages while they're earning their trade. I think that's definitely one strategy. But I think in many ways society is geared us up to have instant gratification and instant recognition. You know, like there is a part of kids these days. I would suggest that 4 years to complete a trade is 4 years too long, or 3 years too long. And finding those, I think the key is finding those rough diamonds earlier in the piece and investing time in it. And a lot of businesses that we work with, they partner with the trade colleges, the tech colleges, even the secondary schools. But the amount of people wanting to look at the automotive industry isn't as strong as what it used to be, because they are competing. Our industry is competing against industries it wasn't competing with probably 30 or 40 years ago. You know, there's such a choice now for kids when they're picking their careers. We need to find a way to be an attractive choice.
Sean, what do you think here in the States, man, with your, obviously you consulting with dealers or coaching dealers and talking to decision makers often? What is their take on it? And I don't know, are you seeing anything in particular that they're the ones that are successfully, getting technicians are doing something maybe we can share with our listeners?
Well, I think the overarching theme here, and I think this goes for the sales and the service side, and Cameron said it best, right? It's marketing the fact that the auto industry is an awesome place to work and be. And,
Yeah.
I think the brand of the overall industry is just kind of tarnished because of years of leadership, poor leadership practices, right? And, I think we have to really change the way we bring people into the car business and let them out of the car business, because if someone leaves the dealership, no matter what department, and they are out there telling everyone how horrible working at a dealership is and how, you're treated like a slave and you work all these hours and then I didn't get my last paycheck, it just spreads, right? So I think that's a challenge. And I think managers have got to learn to engage with the younger generation more effectively. As much as I hate to say it, the generational gap is a real thing, and learning to engage your employees effectively is really important. And now I want to ask Cameron kind of a tough question. All right, Cameron, this is certainly a lot of the dealer principals I coach that use third-party recruitment services. Recruitment, I think, has got to be a part of the leadership routine, but managers are bombarded, 75 different ways as soon as they hit the showroom floor, right? So to really recruit effectively, I mean, I think there's nothing wrong in having backup and having someone, a team like you, help them find the right people. I guess, but what I hear from my dealer principals I coach is often, these recruitment companies are rewarded for turnover. Man, wouldn't it be great if there was a recruitment company that actually, was rewarded for, someone staying within the company in tenure? What's your take on that? Are recruitment companies rewarded for turnover?
Well, I can say from my point of view, the recruitment industry in many ways has been guilty of, and the reason why I started Automotive Talent, one of the main reasons is because the recruitment industry in theory is, if it was a restaurant, it's rewarding people that it gives food poisoning to, basically, doesn't it? Like that's probably a great analogy to use. And I've had especially in my early days, I had dealer principals and business owners say to me, "Hey, why should I use you? Because the last recruitment business I worked with, they placed the service manager within my organization, and I found out that 3 months and 1 day after he started with us, they were approaching him again to be reposted in another role." And for me, that's the equivalent of giving someone food poisoning when they eat at your restaurant. And the difference between the way our company goes about things, I believe is best practice. I'm probably a little bit biased on that though, Sean, I can say, but our business really is at its best when there is a strong and deep partnership with the organization and the people that we work with. And our business doesn't shuffle CVs around the board with the effort of just getting a placement, because we get in so deep with people that we make those lasting relationships. And for me, it's not about getting a placement. our business is at its best when it adds value for years to come. So, and the reason our business has been able to grow so effectively is because of that mindset. But most of the time, the people that we work with and place into these, management roles usually engage us to find staff for them because they've appreciated the process that they've gone through, and that's where our business has been able to be really effective, is because we're basically in the friend gathering business. That's what our business is all about.
So, kind of expanding on that a little bit, when you fill one of these positions, is your obviously your long-term objective is to make sure that the employee stays there for as long as possible. I mean, is there any post follow-up after placing somebody to make sure that they're, happy, if they are maybe considering, or if they're not happy or considering leaving or things like that, maybe you guys can connect with the decision makers and kind of, bridge those gaps, or what happens after the fact?
Yeah, absolutely. Because obviously that's the we are a very personable business. So if we're always interacting with the industry and the people that we place and the industry in general. And a lot of the times we're visiting dealerships where these people have been placed and interacting with them. But we are a part of the relationship. And if at any time that candidate starts to get maybe a not so happy thought, or looking at different options, what have you, then in a very consultative way, we work with all parties, including the business that we placed in, to make sure that anything is made good again. But it's very much like the way we go about things is very much in a true consultative way, not a transactional way. So, as I said, our where we are positioned is being able to add value for the people that we work with, and we're not in it for a short-term relationship. Our business isn't, and this is probably another poor analogy I used the other day. Our business, we're in the businesses of arranging marriages. We're not Tinder. So, right on. So for us, it's about making sure that person is still a friend of our business in 15 years, 50 years from now, not 15 minutes from now.
Cool. So here's $1 million question, man. Does Australia have their Sean Kelly? Do they have their CarBiz coach? Do they have that personality in the market? Bringing coaching to the car business out there.
Oh, look, there are plenty of great people in our industry, and I think the beauty of look, there is a couple of Australian versions of a Sean Kelly, but I think the beauty of all of us is that we all bring a perspective, and I think the industry itself needs people that can share their experiences and share skills. We've all reached a point in our career now, you included, Herb, where you kind of feel like it's your responsibility to give back your experience. Inevitably, that's what we're doing, isn't it? And
yeah, definitely. But that's why I ask that question, because I wanted to get your take on the value of coaching for do you see coaching as something that creates longevity within our industry?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely it does. I believe there's a high value on coaching. And I think the challenge of the coaching world is our clients, some of our clients operate this way. When times are great, it's okay, everyone, we'll go down the coaching bandwagon, we'll sign up for programs, and we do all these great things, and usually when things start to get a little bit pressurized, the training is usually the first line that cops that big thick red texter, doesn't it? And
right, which should be the other way around.
Decreasing. Exactly right. It should be the other way around. Training's one of those things that you know, if you're putting it into a sporting analogy, you know, you don't do all of your training in a preseason and then stop and just start playing day to day. You know, you even in the lead into the Super Bowl, that team trains the week before the biggest game of all, and training in our industry shouldn't be any different.
Yeah, I like what you said there, you know, and I think that for one, if there's an Australian version of me, man, he should definitely keep him over there. USA can't handle two partners. No, I'm joking. But I love what you said about you know, that's what people like us do in the auto industry, and there are so many amazing people, guys and gals, that just share those best practices and experiences we've been through, and I think we can all give some best practices around recruitment here and training, and I'd love to hear your best piece of advice on that. And I'll share like a story. I as a GSM, before I went into the whole coaching mindset, I remember I had hired like 3 people. And I was so excited. 2 of them were 20-car salespeople at different dealerships, and another one was a military veteran like myself. So I was really excited to have these 3. And I thought, man, these guys they're going to knock it out of the park. And it was within 2 weeks, like all 3 of them had decided to leave my store. And I was sitting there going, man, what is going on? So I called my coach and I jumped on. This was like my second coaching conversation ever, you know, way back when. And I said, Coach, what's going on? And he said, well, what's your recruitment process? And I said, well, they come in for an interview, and then I ask them a bunch of questions, and then if I like them, I hire them, you know. And he's like, all right, easy come, easy go, right? And he kind of shed some light on, you know, if you make it too easy to get the job. And I just thought back, well, how did I get hired? I was buying a car in finance, and they said, do you want to sell cars? I was like, sure, you know, when do I start? But I go back to that, and I, you know, and I kind of ended up developing this recruitment process that made the applicant jump through a series of hurdles, and it actually made it challenging to get on the team. So we had a phone interview, then we had a face-to-face interview. We had three face-to-face interviews, a phone interview, a test for competency on lead handling in between. The second interview was on site with my used car manager. If they survived that one and they had to follow up with us to thank us, then they would get to come in for a third interview, and that was with myself. And then even after that, they would have to spend a whole day at our dealership shadowing to see if they even wanted the job. And it was crazy how less than like probably about 30 to 40% of them after that shadowing day would be like, you know what, this isn't for me. I think it's best if I don't start. But the ones that did make it through that process had ridiculous longevity. And then that with the training foundation and then the coaching we gave them pretty much eliminated our turnover. So that would be my biggest tip for the dealers that are watching this. If you want to eliminate turnover, really look at your recruitment process and don't make it too easy for people to get that job there. So Cameron, I'm sure you've got just many gems of knowledge when it comes to this. What would be your best piece of advice for the dealers that are really looking to retain, to bring the right people in and or retain their employees?
Yeah, and I suppose the answer is complicated, but if I could put it into a nutshell, as you say, it shouldn't be we shouldn't be hiring people based on the 2 feet and a heartbeat principle. You know, it's a you know, when it for me, there's two parts of this. Obviously, you've got the recruitment and the selection part of it, and that should be a process. There should be a process involved in that is really aimed for what you're trying to do. But in simple terms, you know, you should be looking for people that fit the environment and fit the culture of the business that you are trying to develop. That's the most important thing, you know, because irrespective of someone's skill, if you know, and Herb, giving you an example, going into a fixed operations scenario here, you know, you could be the world's greatest Mercedes-Benz gold-winning standard master technician that's won all of the awards and technically the most brilliant person that's ever picked up a spanner and used it on a Benz, but if they don't fit your business from a cultural point of view, all of that skill set, they actually end up doing probably more damage than what they can fix. And and they destroy what you're trying to do in that workshop. That is a finely tuned machine in itself. So finding the right characteristics of the person that you're trying to recruit for from a personality point of view, culture fit, and how they would complement the team is in my view the number one priority. The skills is kind of secondary to that in many ways. You know, you can train skills. You can get a beautiful coach in like you, Sean, and say, whatever you don't have, we're going to give you through Sean. So that's the first priority. I think the second priority is the onboarding process.
Wait, Cameron, can you say more about me being beautiful? No, I'm just joking.
Yeah.
Keep going. Sorry, tell me more about the onboarding.
Yeah, and the second part, as I said, the second part is the onboarding process. As you know, I think how that candidate is handled from the time that you've offered them the job through to the first month or two is what I would consider to be the onboarding process. And it's such a strong message you can send to that candidate on how professionally you go about that and what kind of structure and support that you can give them through that time. Because transitioning jobs isn't something that we do on a weekly basis. It's a big step transitioning from your nice, warm, cozy environment and being plucked out and putting into another one. It's a, you know, most people get to the end of their first day and think to themselves on the drive home, Jesus, what have I done? Have I really done the right thing? I think I've made a mistake. And at the end of the first week, they're thinking, I'm pretty sure it's still a mistake, but I'm going to ride it out for a little while longer. And it's not until they get further into it, maybe a month into it, that they actually start hitting the ground and putting all these things together. So yeah, that's why I suggest the recruitment and selection part is absolutely a key portion, a key section of it, and then the onboarding is just as important.
That's great.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, man. So completely kind of switching gears here a little bit. I wanted to just kind of ask you about the market itself, man. I'm trying to see if there's kind of understand a little bit. I'm just curious about the commonalities and if there's some differences and you know, kind of how they, you know, what you guys are doing, and maybe in that conversation there's some takeaways. But let's talk about the customers, right, in your area. Are they as you know, like, tell me about the purchasing journey. Like, how's that for them? Is it you know, are customers spending a lot of time online, and you know, like, what's that like?
Yeah, I think I think as far as similarities between the whole buying process from a customer's perspective is pretty similar. You know, like whenever you start, the typical customer here, whenever they start to feel like they're in the market for a new vehicle, just like over there, they start doing their own research, jumping online and formulating their own judgment on where they feel they need to go from a making a purchase selection perspective, what pathway they need to go down there. So when it comes to interacting with the dealership, the first interaction with the dealership is usually after a long research process that they've done away from the dealership. So yeah, it's very similar on that pathway. You know, as far as the sales process, I would say it's absolutely pretty close to being identical. The expectations from a customer point of view is you know, they know when they get into the dealership, they're going to have a chance to touch and feel and smell and go on test drives, and they're going to have a salesperson interact with them and be in that negotiation process. They're going to have that aftermarket person come to them and talk to them about personalizing their purchase, and then they're going to have that finance person at the end putting together the best deal and best options for them. We have trained the consumer, I think, in both markets pretty well. They pretty much know what they should expect these days, and I think sometimes that's probably a challenge of the business as well. I think that's probably where we're going to see the biggest change, I think, in the next 5, 10, 15 years is how adapting the sales process to the modern customer now, not trying to force the customer into a process that was developed when we still had nappies on, pretty much.
Yeah, right. I was kind of hoping that it was a little bit different so that we could kind of, but it's interesting that it's that we're in the same place. Now, what about online purchases and things of that nature? Is that more? Is it? What am I trying to say? Is it done easier there? Is it? Are you guys seeing more and more of that happening? Like, or kind of what's that like?
I don't think actually. I think probably the online purchasing would probably be more prevalent in your market. I would suggest in Australia, there are only a couple of manufacturers that actually have it as an avenue that you can actually do it. I was talking to one of our Toyota clients only this week, because Toyota have been kind of the early adopters of the online sales process here, and they've had it for a period of 6 months, and they haven't, in this particular dealership, they haven't actually had anyone purchase a car through the online option yet. But
Wow.
He said one thing that I have learned from it, though, is they're educating their customers to find out where their stock availability is. So if a customer is chasing a red Corolla hatch automatic, the online service has actually said which dealerships it actually has a red, and they actually physically visit that dealership. So yeah, it's in its very early days, online purchasing here, excluding your brands that really dominate that space, like your Teslas that don't have a normal dealership network. The regular OEMs, it's a fine balancing act with the OEMs trying to have that as being an option to purchase, and the franchisees actually partnering with them on there. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool, man. Well, listen, thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun. We're getting really close to that time. I wanted to give you a moment to let people know how they can get in touch with you, and kind of share, your social media, whatever you want to share with us as far as an avenue to connect. And then, Sean, I don't know if you have any other questions, man.
Yeah, I just want to thank Cameron for allowing us to have this awesome show, and for sharing some of your wisdom. And yeah, it's crazy. I was working with a point there. I was communicating with SsangYong, New Zealand, and trying to help them get set up with their CRM a few years ago. And yeah, I remember hearing some of the differences in the market, and how the ratio from walk-ins and phone customers to internet leads was so vastly, it's almost the opposite of here in the US. And yeah, it's really cool. It's almost like if you were to go sell cars in that area, it'd be like selling cars maybe in the 90s here, I think, to a certain degree, with the technology side of things. It's kind of interesting. So I loved hearing what you said would definitely align to that, to a certain degree. But yeah, Cameron, I just want to say thank you for sharing your wisdom in recruitment and onboarding and people retention best practices. It was awesome.
Yeah, my pleasure, guys. My pleasure, absolutely. Anything we can do to contribute, more than happy to do so. As far as getting in contact with us, the normal channels. We're very active on Facebook. You can follow Automotive Talent on Facebook and message us directly there. Just search Automotive Talent. LinkedIn also, we're very strong on LinkedIn as well. You can follow our company page there, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn, Cameron Creswell. You can find me. Just look for Cameron Creswell and Automotive Talent in Australia on LinkedIn, and connect with me there too. More than happy to add value and gather friends. That's what we do.
Cameron, thanks again, man. Thanks for joining us. There is one question that I ask everybody that comes on the show, and that question is, where do you see the automotive industry headed in the next 5 years, and why?
I think we're actually from what I've seen, I think we're actually in a really exciting time. I think it's a great time to be in our industry. I think in 5 years from now, we will be starting to go down the pathway of developing these great environments for people to walk into and purchase a vehicle. I think we'll be shaking off the old school methodology of getting tricked into purchasing something that they might not want, and akin to the experience of being more like walking into an Apple store and being a part of something and feeling like you're a part of a buzz. I think that's where our industry is headed here. It's going to be very customer centric, and I'm very excited to see it.
There it is, folks. I love that. I love that comparison to the Apple shopping experience. I think that's real cool. All right, that's all we have for today. Again, Cameron, thank you so much for making the time. I really appreciate it. Sean, thank you so much for joining me on the session. That's all we have, folks. And as usual,